She thought she finally met the man of her dreams. He was gentle, charming, and made her feel like the only woman in the world. But everything changed the night they decided to take things further. When his fake penis slipped off during sex, her world froze. What she did next was something no one could have imagined. This is one of the most disturbing and unbelievable cases of deception, rage, and revenge you will ever hear. Stay with me till the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Welcome to Dark Motives, where we uncover the most shocking and twisted true crime stories from around the world. If you love real cases that leave you questioning human nature, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel grow and keeps you updated whenever we drop new stories like this. And while you're at it, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's get into tonight's case. A story that begins like any modern love story. A woman meets a man online, they fall in love, and she believes she's found her forever. But hidden beneath his smile was a truth so dark, it would turn her passion into pure rage. It all began in Toledo, Ohio, a quiet Midwestern city where life moved at a simple pace. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where neighbors waved from their porches, and the same families had lived on the same streets for generations. That's where Melissa Grant was trying to rebuild her life after a painful breakup. She worked at a local nursing home, spent her evenings scrolling through dating apps, and prayed that someday someone would love her the way she deserved. One night, while on Facebook dating, she came across Derek Miles. He was everything her ex wasn't: calm, respectful, and soft-spoken. His photos showed a clean-cut man with warm eyes and a confident smile. He said he was from Cleveland, but had recently moved to Toledo for work. From the very first message, Melissa felt something she hadn't felt in years. Derek listened. He asked about her day, her dreams, even her favorite kind of music. Before long, they were talking for hours every night. He made her laugh, sent her good morning texts before she even woke up, and always told her to eat something sweet before bed. To her, it felt like fate. Friends told her to slow down, but Melissa kept saying the same thing. He feels different. After a few weeks, Derek started calling her my queen. And in a town where loneliness often lingered longer than love, Melissa thought she had finally found her forever. But what she didn't know was that Derek was hiding something so disturbing. It would soon shatter everything she believed about love, trust, and truth itself. For weeks, everything between Melissa and Derek seemed perfect. They had dinner at small family restaurants, took evening walks through downtown Toledo, and spent long nights watching movies in her apartment. To her, it felt peaceful, easy, natural, like life was finally giving her a break. But beneath the surface, something about Derek didn't quite add up. He avoided talking too much about his past. Whenever Melissa asked about his family, he would change the subject or say, "It's complicated." He claimed his parents had passed away, that he didn't keep in touch with siblings, and that he preferred to leave his past where it belonged. At first, Melissa respected that. Everyone had their secrets. But Derek's went deeper. One night she noticed something strange. As they sat on the couch, she leaned into him, and he suddenly flinched. When she asked if he was okay, he smiled and said he was fine, just tired. But from that moment, Melissa began to sense a distance. He never took off his shirt completely, even when they were alone. And when she playfully asked why, he said, "I've got scars I'm not proud of." That explanation held her for a while, but then came the inconsistencies. His work schedule kept changing, his phone was always locked, and sometimes he disappeared for days, only to reappear with weak excuses about overtime. When she pressed him, he would wrap her in his arms and say, "You're overthinking, baby, I'd never lie to you." Melissa wanted to believe him. Every instinct told her something was off, but every word from his mouth made her want to ignore it. She told herself she'd already lost too much in life. She couldn't lose another chance at love. But deep down, A quiet unease had started to grow. And soon, that unease would lead her straight into the most shocking discovery of her life. The months rolled by, and Melissa's world began to revolve around Derek. They cooked together, prayed together, and spent weekends visiting flea markets and little cafes near the Maumee River. To everyone who saw them, they looked like the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, things were slowly changing. Derek had started acting distant. He would get irritated when Melissa asked simple questions. His mood could flip from calm to cold in seconds. And at night, he would sometimes sleep on the edge of the bed, almost as if he was afraid of being touched. When Melissa brought it up, he would apologize, hold her close, and whisper that he was just dealing with personal stuff. She never pressed further. One evening after dinner, Melissa reached for his laundry basket while tidying up. Buried beneath his clothes was a small medical pouch. Inside it was something that made her heart stop. A tube of surgical adhesive, gauze, and a strange object that looked like part of a prosthetic. She froze. None of it made sense. When Derek walked in and saw her holding it, his face went pale. He snatched the bag from her hands and said it belonged to his cousin. His tone was calm, but his eyes were trembling. Melissa didn't push. She just nodded, pretending to believe him, but her mind was spinning. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together everything that hadn't made sense before. The secrets, the guarded body, the strange excuses. They were all adding up. Melissa didn't know what to believe anymore, but one thing was clear. Derek wasn't the man he claimed to be, and soon, the truth would come crashing into her life in a way she could never have prepared for. It happened on a quiet Saturday night. Melissa had cooked dinner, lit candles, and turned on soft music. She wanted to reconnect, to feel close again. Derek seemed uneasy, but he didn't say much. After dinner, they moved to the bedroom. For the first time in weeks, Melissa felt a spark of hope. Maybe things were finally getting back to normal. But within moments, everything changed. As they became intimate, Derek tensed up. He kept shifting away, avoiding her touch, his body trembling with nerves. Melissa tried to reassure him, but when she reached for him again, something unexpected happened. She heard a faint snap, followed by silence. Derek froze, eyes wide with panic. Melissa looked down and saw it. A flesh-colored object lying beside them on the bed. For a second, she couldn't process what she was seeing. Then it hit her. It wasn't real. It wasn't him. The piece had fallen off completely. Her breath caught in her throat, her mind racing to understand what was happening. Derek tried to grab it, stuttering, begging her to calm down, saying he could explain. But Melissa's body went numb. Her hands shook, her chest tightened, and tears filled her eyes. She backed away from him, her voice breaking as she asked, "Who are you?" The man standing before her wasn't who she thought she loved. The truth poured out in pieces. Derek wasn't the man he claimed to be. He was born female, had been living under a new identity for years, and had never told her the truth. Every kiss, every touch, every moment had been built on a lie. Melissa felt her entire world collapse. The man she trusted, the man she opened her home and heart to, wasn't real. She sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, her mind caught between disbelief and fury. Derek tried to approach her, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. In that moment, something inside her snapped. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, it all boiled into something dark. And from that night forward, nothing in Melissa's life would ever be the same again. The next few moments were filled with chaos. Melissa stood frozen, her mind spinning between anger and disbelief. Derek tried to talk, but his words meant nothing. Every sound in the room felt distant, like the world had gone silent except for the pounding in her chest. She couldn't stop staring at him. The man she thought she knew was a lie, and the thought burned inside her like fire. She walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, trying to steady her breathing. But the reflection staring back at her didn't look like her anymore. Her eyes were red, her hands were shaking, and her heart was filled with something she had never felt before. Betrayal. She whispered to herself, "He made a fool out of me." When she came back into the room, Derek was sitting on the edge of the bed, crying. He kept saying he didn't mean to hurt her, that he only lied because he was scared she wouldn't understand. But to Melissa it was too late for explanations. She felt stripped of her dignity, humiliated, and deceived. The anger inside her was growing by the second. She started pacing the room, muttering to herself, asking how long he had planned to keep the secret. Derek begged her to calm down, saying he loved her and never wanted to lose her, but that only made her angrier. She shouted that he had already lost her, that he had taken away her trust, her peace, and her sense of safety. Something snapped in that room. Melissa's tears turned to rage. Her voice broke as she screamed, "You don't lie about something like that." She grabbed her phone and threw it at the wall. Then she stormed out of the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Derek sat there in silence, realizing that the truth he had been hiding for years had finally destroyed everything. But what neither of them knew was that this was only the beginning. By morning, Melissa's anger would take a turn so dark, so irreversible, that it would leave Toledo shaken for years to come. The night stretched on, cold and heavy. Melissa didn't sleep. She sat alone in the living room, staring into the dark, her mind replaying everything that had just happened. Every smile, every touch, every moment of trust now felt poisoned. She couldn't stop thinking about how easily he had looked her in the eyes and lied. Each thought made her chest tighten until it felt like she couldn't breathe. Sometime after midnight, Derek walked out of the bedroom. His eyes were swollen, his voice soft. He said he would pack his things and leave in the morning, that he didn't want to make things worse. But Melissa wasn't listening. She watched him move around her apartment like a stranger, and the anger in her eyes only grew darker. He turned his back for a moment, bending to pick up his bag. In that instant, Melissa's pain boiled over into something uncontrollable. All she could see was betrayal. Her mind clouded, her hands shaking as she grabbed the first thing near her, a glass candle holder from the coffee table. She called out his name. When he turned around, she swung. The glass shattered against his face, the sound echoing through the apartment. Derek fell back, crying out in shock. Melissa didn't stop. She screamed, shouting words that didn't even make sense, her rage exploding after weeks of silence and suspicion. When the neighbors later described it, they said they heard shouting, then a loud crash, and then nothing. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise that came before it. By the time Melissa stopped, she was standing over him, her body trembling, her hands covered in what looked like red paint but wasn't paint at all. The reality of what she had done began to sink in. The room was a mess, the candles still flickering, and Derek lay motionless on the floor. Melissa's breathing was ragged, her thoughts scattered. She dropped the glass and stepped back, whispering to herself, "What have I done?" In that moment, everything went quiet again. The anger was gone. All that was left was the sound of her own heartbeat and the dreadful truth that she had crossed a line she could never return from. For a long time, Melissa just stood there. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The reality of what she had done was slowly sinking in, but her mind refused to believe it. She sank to her knees beside him, shaking his shoulder, whispering his name, begging him to wake up. There was no response. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. The man she had once called her world was gone. She crawled to the corner of the room, rocking back and forth, whispering to herself over and over, "He lied to me." Her breath came in short bursts, panic tightening around her chest. Minutes felt like hours. She wanted to call for help, but she couldn't move. Her phone was shattered against the wall, the same phone she had thrown just hours earlier. When the sun began to rise, the apartment was still. The once romantic space now looked like a crime scene. Someone walking their dog outside heard soft crying coming from the open window and called the police. Moments later, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the small brick building on Monroe Street. Officers knocked several times before entering. What they found left them stunned. Melissa was sitting on the couch staring blankly at the floor, her hands covered in dried blood. The air was thick with the smell of wine and broken glass. When an officer asked her what happened, she simply said, "He lied to me." Her voice was calm, distant, almost hollow. They handcuffed her gently, leading her out of the apartment as neighbors peeked through curtains and doorways. News spread fast through Toledo. By evening, local stations were running the story of a woman who had killed her partner after a shocking discovery. Reporters called it the deception killing. The city buzzed with confusion and disbelief. Some felt sympathy for her heartbreak. Others felt disgust at the violence. But no matter which side they stood on, one thing was clear. Love had turned into something terrifying that night. The trial began 6 months later inside the Lucas County Courthouse. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Reporters crowded the hallway, and the public waited to hear every detail of the case that had divided the city. Melissa entered wearing a pale jumpsuit, her face tired, her eyes distant. She looked nothing like the woman her friends once described as warm and gentle. The prosecution painted her as a jealous, violent woman who couldn't handle rejection. The defense, however, described her as a victim of emotional deceit who simply snapped under unbearable pressure. Witness after witness took the stand. Friends of the couple spoke about how close they seemed, how no one ever suspected the truth about Derek's identity. A nurse from the emergency room described the scene that night: the shattered glass, the silence, the look on Melissa's face when police arrived. The medical examiner confirmed what everyone already knew. One blow had caused massive trauma. It was quick, brutal, and final. When Melissa finally took the stand, the courtroom went completely silent. She spoke softly, her voice shaking as she explained how she felt humiliated and broken. She said she didn't plan to hurt him, that she lost control when the truth came out. Some jurors looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Others listened closely, their expressions unreadable. It was clear she regretted what she had done, but remorse alone couldn't erase what had happened. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdict was read. The jury found her guilty of voluntary manslaughter. A cry echoed through the courtroom. It came from Melissa's mother in the back row. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. As she was led away, she turned once toward the courtroom gallery, her eyes wet, but empty. The love story that began with messages and promises had ended with handcuffs and silence. Melissa Grant began serving her sentence at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville. She kept mostly to herself, spending her days in the prison library and writing letters she never sent. In interviews, she said she wasn't a monster, just a woman who broke under a truth she wasn't prepared to face. She spoke about love, trust, and the dangerous things people do when both are built on lies. Her story became a lesson whispered in small-town conversations and online discussions for years to come. As for Derek Miles, his story faded into quiet remembrance. Those who knew him described him as kind, gentle, and terrified of being judged for who he truly was. His friends said he only wanted to be loved without fear. The tragedy of that night was that 2 people who were both searching for acceptance ended up destroying each other in the process. Even now, Toledo remembers that apartment on Monroe Street, the one where love turned into chaos. It stands as a silent reminder that secrets, no matter how small, always find a way to surface. And when truth finally comes out, it can either set you free or tear your world apart. What do you think about this case? Was Melissa a victim of betrayal or someone who let rage take control? Comment your thoughts below and tell me where you're watching from. Your opinions help keep these stories alive, and every perspective matters. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to Dark Motives for more real stories that reveal how love, lies, and desperation can twist into tragedy. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.